While performing a scene on stage, Etzel Cardeña gripped a mirror so tightly that it suddenly shattered in his hand. A large shard of glass sliced deep into his palm, and he began bleeding profusely. Yet he felt zero pain. He maintained his performance without breaking focus. Months later, during a group trip to the Ajusco Mountains, 2,000 meters above sea level, he entered a spontaneous state of intense connection. He stripped off his clothes and shoes, climbing barefoot through the freezing mist and harsh terrain without suffering hypothermia or a single injury. These were observable physiological occurrences happening to a performing artist who was pushing his biology far past its expected limits. In both instances, the physical stimuli of extreme cold and nerve damage failed to trigger the automatic biological responses predicted by our standard models. These anomalies suggest our current map of the waking mind is missing a significant piece of the human experience. Cardeña grew up in Mexico City in an environment where the edges of the mind were openly explored. His father, a psychoanalyst, conducted informal telepathy and clairvoyance exercises with family, treating the investigation of the mind's margins as a natural pursuit. As he grew older, Cardeña recognized an intellectual vacuum. Mainstream psychology largely ignored the physical power of the altered states he had induced on stage, leaving these raw biological overrides unexamined by formal research. To figure out exactly what was happening to his own nervous system, he realized he needed tools sharper than theatrical intuition. He decided to leave the stage and take his questions into the clinical laboratory. He enrolled at the University of California, Davis, to pursue a PhD under Charles Tart, a researcher known for the formal study of altered states. Here, Cardeña focused on phenomenology, the systematic documentation of subjective, first-person experience. He applied this methodology to subjects operating under deep hypnosis. This diagram represents what Cardeña mapped, a transition from the scattered neural noise of an ordinary waking state into the highly concentrated signature of a deep trance. He was measuring the exact focus used to ignore a bleeding hand. By quantifying these signatures, Cardeña proved that intense subjective trances possess distinct, measurable physiological footprints. Cardeña took this data to Stanford University, securing a postdoctoral position under Dr. David Spiegel to conduct intensive research on trauma. Their work centered on dissociation. Under extreme stress, the human mind can fracture awareness or hyperfocus it onto a single point of survival. This visualization illustrates the mechanics of that disconnection. The brain actively severs pathways from sensory pain receptors, muting external input while maintaining executive control. Cardeña overlaid first-person accounts directly onto these brain states. He called this hybrid analytical framework neurophenomenology. He had transformed himself from a subject of inexplicable anomalies into a clinician mapping those same events with scientific precision. This precision led to his appointment as the endowed Thorsen Professor of Psychology at Lund University in Sweden. There, he directs the Center for Research on Consciousness and Anomalous Psychology, or CERCAP, dedicating its resources to testing the furthest boundaries of the human mind. The center brings together every thread of his life: the telepathy experiments of his childhood, the inductions of the theater, and the hard data of clinical psychology are tested within a unified framework. Operating a dedicated research center out of a major European university suggests the study of extreme psychological phenomena is now a legitimate institutionalized science. Through decades of observation, Cardeña arrived at a clear conclusion. The ordinary waking state we experience every day is a small suitcase, a restricted perceptual filter that limits our understanding of human potential. Extreme states of consciousness provide measurable data points that reveal the broader range of human perception. By applying the scientific method to the unexplainable, Cardeña has taken the dark, unexplored corners of the mind and pulled them into the light of rigorous empirical science. We are taught that modern science operates as a perfectly objective machine. Raw data is fed in, and the accepted truth is cleanly sorted out. When presented with new empirical evidence, scientists are expected to update their worldview accordingly. In 2018, that machine hit a massive anomaly. Dr. Etzel Cardeña, a professor at Lund University, published a high-profile review in American Psychologist the flagship journal of the American Psychological Association. This was a massive meta-analysis. Cardeña aggregated decades of experimental evidence on telepathy, clairvoyance, and precognition, applying standard scientific rigor to phenomena usually dismissed as folklore. This side-by-side bar chart compares the statistical effect sizes of standard psychological phenomena against those of psi phenomena. The datasets reach equal heights. The statistical evidence for anomalous cognition proved to be as robust as many widely accepted psychological mechanisms. Cardeña's review accounted for the standard skeptical dismissals. The math suggested these results could not be explained away by academic fraud, poor methodology, or simple statistical chance. One might expect these findings to prompt a careful reevaluation of how we understand the mind. Instead, the paper ignited a fierce and highly emotional academic war. When robust empirical data directly threatens the foundational rules of a discipline, the ideal of scientific objectivity often gives way to the protection of established dogma. The scientific establishment operates within a materialist worldview. In this framework, the universe is a rigid structure where every event must be explained by the physical interaction of separated particles. Prominent skeptics Arthur S. Reber and James E. Alcock launched a formal counterattack in the Skeptical Inquirer magazine to defend that structure. Classical physics relies on a linear chain of falling dominoes, representing rigid cause and effect and a forward-moving arrow of time. Because psi contradicts these 19th century laws, skeptics deemed the actual statistical data irrelevant, refusing to engage with Cardeña's math. Some critics proudly declared they did not even read the meta-analysis. They chose to dismiss the findings entirely because the data challenged their existing perception of physical reality. Cardeña identifies this as epistemological totalitarianism, a refusal to acknowledge any evidence that falls outside the pre-approved boundaries of nature. Moving past the physics debate, there is a more human element at play, the psychological stress experienced by researchers encountering the impossible. Psychologists call this cognitive dissonance. It's the friction created when a person is confronted with data that directly contradicts their existing sense of reality. Psychologist Susan Blackmore experienced this phenomenon firsthand. Witnessing successful telepathy experiments with children, she reported feeling no scientific excitement. Instead, she felt an overwhelming urge to find alternative explanations. Psychiatrist Elizabeth Mayer described a similar reaction. After successfully acting as a receiver in a psi experiment, she felt a terrifying mind split and an instant loss of control, prompting an immediate retreat to logical rationalizations. The aggressive suppression of this field functions as a psychological shield, guarding the comforting belief that the human mind remains isolated and predictable. While critics rely on 19th century physics, the proven realities of 20th century quantum mechanics provide a very different map of the universe. Cardeña's defense is simple. The skeptics are right that psi breaks classical physics, but classical physics is already known to be an incomplete model of the universe. This diagram shows non-locality. When one particle is stimulated, the other instantly reacts. Cardeña notes psi data aligns with these quantum phenomena. He theorizes our ordinary consciousness acts as a filter, hiding these connections. Altered states remove this filter, allowing non-local realities to be measured. Cardeña argues it is time to drop the isolating para prefix and integrate this research into mainstream academia as anomalistic psychology. To build a unified theory, science must stop fearing anomalies. It must follow the data, even when that data challenges our most basic assumptions about how the world is put together.